In the quiet courtyard of Lincoln Middle School, a shy transfer student was about to be cornered by a pack of bullies. What started as a lonely walk to his locker took a shocking turn when they drenched him in red paint in front of the whole class. Jin Tao wasn't your typical 8th grader. For over a decade, he had trained under his grandfather, a Shaolin monk, mastering ancient kung fu forms that taught discipline as much as defense. Known for his calm presence and almost eerie stillness, Jin had never needed to prove himself until now. When he saw a squirrel scatter after the sudden splash, Jin didn't flinch. He simply bowed his head, his eyes flashing with controlled fury. The bullies had no idea they were taunting someone who could snap a branch mid-air with 2 fingers. Jin's measured response, one precise move that left their ringleader breathless, set off a chain of awe and reckoning that would ripple through the halls. What began as public humiliation would become a powerful rebalancing of power. The student body at Lincoln Middle would never be the same after one quiet warrior rose from the shadows, dripping in paint and glowing with purpose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Kai-chun pressed his palms against the cool metal of his new locker, taking a deep breath as the unfamiliar sounds of Red Rock High School echoed around him. The desert air felt different in his lungs compared to the perpetual fog of San Francisco. Everything here seemed sharper, harsher, and infinitely more intimidating. At 17, Kai had the kind of understated presence that came from years of disciplined training, though his lean frame was hidden beneath a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans. His black hair fell in gentle waves across his forehead, and his dark eyes held a quiet intensity that most people mistook for shyness. Starting mid-semester was brutal enough without having to decode an entirely new social ecosystem. Back in San Francisco, he had been just another face in a diverse crowd of 3,000 students. Here at Red Rock High, with its 1,200 students and tight-knit community dynamics, being the outsider felt like wearing a neon sign. What none of them knew was that beneath his unassuming exterior lay 11 years of intensive tiger-style kung fu training. From age 6 to 17, he had spent every morning before sunrise and every evening after homework in his grandfather's backyard studio in Chinatown. He had earned his black sash at 14, and just 6 months before the move, he had successfully completed his advanced forms under Master Liang's watchful eye. Kung Fu was a last resort, Kai, his grandfather had said during their final lesson together, his weathered hands demonstrating a gentle defensive block. Your greatest victory will always be the fight you don't have to fight. Excuse me, are you Kai-chun? A voice broke through his memories. He turned to see a girl with shoulder-length dark hair and intelligent brown eyes standing beside him. She wore a vintage band t-shirt and carried a worn leather messenger bag covered in political pins. That's me, he replied quietly, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent that marked him as an outsider. I'm Camilla Reyes, but everyone calls me Cam. I write for the school paper. She extended her hand with a genuine smile. I heard you transferred from San Francisco. That's a pretty big change. Kai shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the way she made direct eye contact. It is. Still getting used to the desert. Well, if you need someone to show you around or explain the local ecosystem, I'm your girl. Fair warning though, this place can be a little intense about hierarchy. Before Kai could ask what she meant, the sound of loud laughter echoed down the hallway. A group of athletic-looking students approached, led by a tall blond boy wearing a varsity letterman jacket. His name was embroidered on the chest, Jake Harper, Captain. Well, well, Jake said, his voice carrying easily over the hallway noise. The mysterious new kid. I'm Jake Harper, football captain, student body president. Basically the guy who runs things around here. He extended his hand with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Kai shook Jake's hand, noting the unnecessarily Firm grip and the way Jake's friends flanked him like bodyguards. "Nice to meet you. So where exactly did you transfer from?" Jake asked, his tone friendly but with an undertone of interrogation. "San Francisco." "San Francisco, huh? That's a long way from home. What brought your family to our little desert paradise?" Kai hesitated. The truth was complicated: his parents' divorce, his mother's new job, the need to leave behind painful memories. "My mom got a job opportunity." Jake's smile widened. "What kind of opportunity?" "I mean, most people are trying to get out of Red Rock, not move here. She's a nurse practitioner. The hospital offered her a position." That's cool. Jake's eyes swept over Kai's simple clothes and worn backpack. "You play any sports?" "We're always looking for new talent." Not really. "Come on, man, you've got to have some kind of athletic background." "What do you do for fun?" Kai felt the weight of multiple stares. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by Jake's magnetic presence and the novelty of the new student interrogation. "I like to read. Practice meditation." Logan Price, Jake's red-headed lieutenant, snorted. "Meditation? Like sitting cross-legged and humming?" "Something like that," Kai replied calmly. Jake's grin faltered slightly. He wasn't used to students who didn't seem intimidated or eager to impress him. "Well, that single quote's interesting. You'll find Red Rock's a little different from San Francisco. We're more about action than contemplation here." "I'm sure I'll adapt," Kai said simply. The warning bell rang and the crowd began to disperse. Jake lingered for a moment, studying Kai with new interest. "I'm sure you will. See you around, Kai-chun." As Jake and his group moved away, Cam stepped closer to Kai. "That was interesting," she said quietly. "How so?" "Jake's used to people either kissing up to him or being openly afraid. You did neither." She shouldered her bag. "That's going to make you either very popular or very unpopular. There's not much middle ground here." During third period gym class, Kai found himself changing in the locker room beside students whose conversation revealed the school's social geography. Red Rock High was dominated by athletics: football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. Academic achievement was respected, but secondary to athletic prowess. "Chun, you're with the blue team," Coach Graves called out as they filed into the gymnasium. Coach Graves was a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of watchful eyes that missed nothing. The activity was dodgeball, and Kai found himself directly in Jake's line of fire. The rubber ball came at him with considerable force, but Kai's body moved before his mind could process the threat. He sidestepped smoothly, his weight shifting from one foot to the other in a motion so fluid it looked like dancing. Jake threw again, harder this time. Kai deflected the ball with his forearm, redirecting its momentum rather than stopping it cold. The ball bounced harmlessly to the side. "Nice reflexes," Coach Graves commented from the sideline, his voice neutral, but his eyes sharp with interest. From the corner of his eye, Kai noticed Jake's increasingly frustrated expression. Each throw was more aggressive than the last, and each time Kai avoided or deflected with minimal effort, never retaliating, never even seeming particularly concerned. When the game ended, Coach Graves approached Kai as he headed toward the locker room. "You've got good balance, Chun. You ever do any martial arts?" "A little," Kai replied carefully. "A little." Coach Graves nodded slowly. "Well, that was some fancy footwork for a little. You ever change your mind about trying out for a sport, you let me know." 3 days later, Kai had settled into a routine that kept him largely invisible. He arrived early, ate lunch with Cam and a few other students from the school newspaper, and left promptly after his last class. His strategy of quiet integration seemed to be working until at WSN single quotes T. The cafeteria was at peak capacity when it happened. Kai was carrying his lunch tray, navigating between tables toward where Cam sat with her laptop open, working on an article. He didn't see Jake and Logan approaching from behind until it was too late. "Hey, meditation boy," Jake called, out loudly, his voice carrying across the dining area. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day." Kai turned, instinctively shifting his weight to a more balanced stance. "What about it? You said you like to adapt, right?" "Well, I thought maybe we could help you adapt to Red Rock culture a little faster." Before Kai could respond, Logan appeared. Beside him with a large paper cup filled with what looked like tempera paint, the kind used in art class. "Consider this your official Red Rock welcome," Logan said with a grin, and dumped the bright red paint down Kai's back. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and laughter. Students pulled out their phones, recording as the paint soaked through Kai's white t-shirt and dripped onto the floor. Jake crossed his arms, waiting for the explosion of anger or humiliation that would cement Kai's place in the school hierarchy. Instead, Kai stood perfectly still for a moment, feeling the cold paint seep through his shirt. Then, without a word, he set down his lunch tray and calmly pulled off his stained shirt. The laughter died instantly. Kai's back and shoulders revealed the lean muscle of someone who had trained for years, but more striking were the small scars that crisscrossed his skin, evidence of countless hours of conditioning and sparring. He folded the shirt neatly and placed it on his tray, then picked up his lunch and walked toward the exit in just his undershirt. "Dude, what the hell?" someone whispered. "Did you see those scars? That's not normal." Jake stood frozen, his moment of triumph dissolving into confusion. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. New kids were supposed to cry or fight back, or at least show some kind of reaction. They weren't supposed to treat public humiliation like a minor inconvenience. Cam had been recording the entire incident on her phone, and she caught the moment when Kai's composure completely deflated Jake's satisfaction. She followed Kai outside, where he was sitting on a bench, eating his sandwich as if nothing had happened. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I'm fine," Kai replied, his voice steady. "That was ... Cam struggled for words. "That was incredible. I've never seen anyone handle Jake like that." "Handle him?" "The way you completely ignored his whole power play. You made him look foolish without even trying." Kai finished his sandwich and looked out at the desert landscape surrounding the school. "My grandfather always said that a person's actions reveal their character, not their intentions." Jake revealed his character today. And what character is that? Someone who needs to humiliate others to feel powerful. That's not strength, that's weakness. Cam studied Kai's profile, noting the way he seemed completely unbothered by what had just happened. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Those scars on your back, they're not from accidents, are they?" Kai was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather trained me in traditional martial arts." "Real training leaves marks." "What kind of martial arts?" "The kind that teaches you when not to fight." That afternoon, Cam published a short article on the school's online newspaper titled "New Student Shows Grace Under Pressure." She didn't mention the paint incident directly, but wrote about dignity, respect, and what it meant to respond to provocation with composure rather than retaliation. The article was shared dozens of times within hours, and by the next morning, everyone at Red Rock High was talking about the mysterious new kid who had somehow made Jake Harper look like a fool without throwing a single punch. The week following the paint incident, Red Rock High buzzed with speculation about Kai Chun. The story had grown in the telling. Some claimed he was a former gang member with prison tattoos. Others whispered that he was a martial arts prodigy who had been expelled from his previous school for fighting. The truth, as usual, was more complex than any of the rumors. Kai found himself the subject of intense scrutiny. Students watched him walk through the hallways, noting his posture, his movement, the way he seemed to glide rather than walk. In gym class, Coach Graves continued to observe him with professional interest, while Jake's group maintained a careful distance, unsure how to proceed. During lunch, Can cornered Kai with a series of questions that had been building since the paint incident. They sat in the school's small courtyard, away from the main dining area. "I've been doing some research," she said, pulling out her notebook. "There are videos online of traditional kung fu practitioners and the way they move. It's similar to how you moved when you dodged those dodgeballs." Kai sipped his water, neither confirming nor denying her observation. "I'm not trying to expose you," Cam continued. "I'm trying to understand. You're not like other students here. You have this quality like you're holding back something powerful." "Everyone holds back something," Kai replied quietly. "Not like this. I've been watching Jake since the paint thing, and he's rattled. He keeps talking about you, trying to figure out what your deal is. He's planning something." Kai looked up from his lunch. "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly. But Logan's been asking around about your background. They're trying to find something they can use against you." That afternoon, Kai encountered Aiden Shah, a Pakistani-American junior who had been one of Jake's frequent targets. Aiden was smaller than most students, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of nervous energy that marked him as perpetually anxious. "Hey," Aiden said, approaching Kai's locker hesitantly. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "Since the paint thing, Jake's been different. He's still a jerk, but he's not targeting people as much. It's like he's too focused on figuring you out to bother with the rest of us." Kai closed his locker and turned to face Aiden. "That's not going to last. People like Jake don't change their nature because of one incident." "Maybe not, but it's given some of us a break." Aiden adjusted his glasses nervously. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The way you handled that situation, where did you learn to stay so calm?" Kai considered the question. "My grandfather taught me that anger is like fire. It can warm you or burn you, depending on how you control it." Could you teach me that? How to control it, I mean." Before Kai could answer, Jake appeared at the end of the hallway with Logan and 2 other football players. They approached slowly, deliberately, like predators sizing up their prey. "Kaya-chun," Jake said, his voice carrying that familiar undertone of challenge. "I've been hearing interesting things about you." "What kind of things?" "People are saying you're some kind of martial arts expert. That you've been holding back on us." Double quotes. Kai remained silent, his expression neutral. "See, that bothers me," Jake continued. "Because if that's true, then you made me look like an idiot for no reason. You could have just told me you were trained instead of playing the quiet, innocent act." "I never claimed to be innocent," Kai replied calmly. "No, but you let me think you were harmless." "That's almost like lying, isn't it?" Aiden stepped slightly behind Kai, his anxiety palpable. Logan noticed the movement and grinned. "Look at that," Logan said. Little Aiden's found himself a bodyguard. "I'm not anyone's bodyguard," Kai said simply. "Prove it," Jake challenged. "If you're not here to protect the weak kids, then you won't mind if we finish a conversation with Aiden that got interrupted yesterday." Jake stepped toward Aiden, but Kai moved slightly, not blocking the path but somehow making it clear that Jake would have to go through him to reach the smaller boy. "That's what I thought," Jake said, his voice rising. "You are playing protector, which means you think you're better than us, stronger than us. So why don't you prove it?" "I don't have anything to prove," Kai replied. "Everyone has something to prove here, Chun. That's how it works. You can't just show up and disrupt the natural order without consequences." The hallway had filled with students, drawn by the rising tension. Phones appeared, ready to record whatever happened next. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake announced, his voice carrying to the gathering crowd. "Tomorrow after school, behind the gym, you and me, we settle this like men. I'm not going to fight you, Jake. Then you're going to keep getting humiliated. Until you do. And so is anyone stupid enough to think you're going to protect them. Jake turned to Aiden, who was pressed against the lockers. "Isn't that right, Aiden? Your new friend here is going to let you down, just like everyone else." "Leave him alone," Kai said quietly, but his voice carried a new edge. "Or what?" Jake stepped closer. "You'll meditate at me?" The crowd held its breath, waiting for Kai's response. Coach Graves appeared at the edge of the gathering, his expression watchful but not yet intervening. Kai looked at Aiden's frightened face, then at the crowd of students watching with a mixture of anticipation and fear. He thought of his grandfather's words about the fights you don't have to fight, and realized that sometimes the fight you don't want to have is the one that matters most. "Fine," Kai said quietly. "Tomorrow after school. But not for you, for them." He gestured to the crowd of students who had been watching Jake's reign of intimidation for too long. Jake's grin returned. "That's more like it. Don't worry, Chun. I'll try not to hurt you too badly." As the crowd dispersed, Cam approached Kai with her notebook out. "You know this is exactly what he wanted, right? To force you into his arena on his terms." "I know," Kai replied, watching Jake's retreating figure. "But sometimes the arena chooses you." That evening, Kai sat in his room, looking out at the desert landscape that stretched beyond his window. He could hear his grandfather's voice as clearly as if the old man were sitting beside him. "Remember, Kai, the tiger does not hunt for sport. But when the tiger wakes, the jungle itself takes notice." Tomorrow, Red Rock High would learn the difference between sleeping strength and awakened power. But first, Kai had to make sure he remembered it himself. The next morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Kai had spent the night in meditation, centering himself and reviewing his grandfather's teachings about necessary conflict. He arrived at school to find the hallways buzzing with anticipation. Word of the after-school confrontation had spread beyond the initial witnesses. During second period, Kai noticed Aiden being cornered near the science wing by Logan and another football player named Marcus Webb. They had the smaller boy pressed against the lockers, their voices low but their body language aggressive. "So your bodyguard thinks he can take on Jake Harper," Logan was saying, his finger jabbed toward Aiden's chest. "What do you think happens to you when Jake destroys your little martial arts friend?" Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Aiden's face was pale behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't," Marcus added. "You've been walking around like you're untouchable since Chun showed up." Time for a reality check. Logan grabbed Aiden's backpack and dumped its contents onto the floor. Notebooks, textbooks, and a scientific calculator scattered across the linoleum. "Oops," Logan said with mock innocence. "Clumsy me." That's when Kai appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked toward them with that same fluid grace that had become his signature, his expression calm, but his dark eyes focused intently on the scene. Students in the hallway stopped to watch, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Is there a problem here?" Kai asked quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. Logan turned, his face lighting up with anticipation. Well, the mysterious Kung Fu master. We were just having a friendly conversation with your little friend here." "It doesn't look very friendly," Kai observed, kneeling to help Aiden gather his scattered belongings. "Maybe you should mind your own business," Marcus said, stepping closer. "This doesn't concern you." Kai stood slowly, Aiden's calculator in his hand. "Actually, it does." He extended the calculator toward Aiden, but Logan intercepted it, grabbing Kai's wrist. "I said mind your own." Logan never finished the sentence. Kai's free hand moved in a small, precise circle, applying pressure to a specific point on Logan's wrist. The grip released immediately, and Logan found himself gently but firmly guided away from both Kai and Aiden. The movement was so smooth and subtle that most observers missed exactly what had happened. "Whoa," someone whispered from the growing crowd. Logan stared at his hand in confusion, flexing his fingers. "What did you just do?" "I helped you let go," Kai replied simply, handing the calculator to Aiden. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. "You think you're smart, don't you? Just wait until Jake gets his hands on you." "I'm not waiting for anything," Kai said, his voice carrying a new edge. "But I am asking you to leave Aiden alone. Or what?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kai looked at Marcus, then at Logan, then at the crowd of students who had gathered to watch. He could feel the weight of their expectations, their need for someone to finally stand up to the bullies who had dominated their school experience. "Or I'll ask again less politely," Kai said quietly. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "You hear that, Logan? Kung Fu Boy is threatening us." "I'm not threatening anyone," Kai replied. "I'm making a promise." The bell rang, breaking the tension. Students began moving toward their classes, but the whispered conversations continued. Logan and Marcus left without another word, but their retreating glances promised that this wasn't over. "Thank you," Aiden said quietly as he shouldered his backpack. "You don't need to thank me," Kai replied. "But you might want to stay close to other people for the rest of the day." Coach Graves appeared from around the corner, having witnessed the end of the confrontation. He approached Kai as the hallway cleared. "Interesting technique," the coach said neutrally. "I don't know what you mean," Kai replied. "That joint manipulation. Very clean, very controlled." "Where'd you learn that?" Kai met the older man's eyes. "My grandfather taught me that sometimes the best way to stop someone is to help them stop themselves." Coach Graves nodded slowly. "Smart grandfather. You might want to be careful though. Word is Jake's been asking his older brother for advice." "His older brother?" "Dustin Harper. Graduated 2 years ago, did some amateur MMA fighting. Jake's been feeling pressure from his old man to handle you properly." Coach Graves adjusted his clipboard. "Just thought you should know what you might be walking into." By lunchtime, the story of Kai's encounter with Logan had grown in the telling. Some claimed he had used pressure points to paralyze Logan's arm. Others insisted he had thrown Logan across the hallway with supernatural force. The truth, as usual, was quieter but no less significant. Cam found Kai sitting alone in the courtyard, eating his lunch and reading a worn paperback copy of The Art of War. "Interesting choice of reading material," she said, sitting across from him. "My grandfather's copy," Kai replied, not looking up from the page. "He said Sun Tzu understood that the greatest victory is winning without fighting." "Is that what you're planning for this afternoon?" Kai closed the book and looked at her. "I'm planning to end this without anyone getting seriously hurt, including Jake. Especially Jake. He's not evil, Can. He's just scared." "Scared? Jake Harper is scared of you?" "Jake Harper is scared of not being Jake Harper anymore. He's built his entire identity around being the strongest, the most dominant. If he can't intimidate me, what does that say about his power?" Cam pulled out her notebook. "Can I ask you something for the record? Depends on the question. Are you really a martial arts expert?" Kai was quiet for a long moment. "I've been training since I was 6 years old. My grandfather was a disciple at a Shaolin temple before he came to America. He taught me that martial arts isn't about fighting, it's about understanding yourself and your place in the world." "And what's your place in the world, Kai-chun?" "I'm still figuring that out." The afternoon passed slowly, each class period building toward the inevitable confrontation. Word had spread beyond the school, some students had texted their friends, and a small crowd of recent graduates and older siblings were expected to attend the fight. During final period, Jake made his announcement in front of the entire chemistry. "Class, attention everyone," he said, standing up despite Mrs. Patterson's protests. "Today we find out if our mysterious new student is all talk or if he can back up his Zen master routine." "Mr. Harper, sit down immediately," Mrs. Patterson said. Sharply. 4 o'clock behind the gym, Jake continued, ignoring the teacher. Time to separate the fighters from the philosophers. After class, Aiden caught up with Kai in the hallway, his face creased with worry. You don't have to do this, Aiden said. Urgently, Jake's not worth it. None of this is worth it. It's not about Jake, Kai replied. It's about everyone who's been afraid to walk down the hallway without looking over their shoulder. But what if you get hurt? What if he hurts you badly? Kai paused at his locker, considering the question. My grandfather once told me that pain is temporary, but regret lasts forever. I'd rather face Jake Harper than live with the regret of not standing up when it mattered. Cam appeared beside them, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. I'm going to record this, she announced. Whatever happens, people need to see it. I'd prefer if you didn't, Kai said. Too bad. This is bigger than just you and Jake now. This is about changing how things work at this school. At 3:45, Kai walked toward the gym with a small entourage cam with her camera. Aiden, despite his obvious anxiety, and a few other students who had found courage in his example. Word had spread, and by the time they reached the area behind the gym, a crowd of nearly 50 students had gathered. Jake was already there, surrounded by his usual crew and several older students Kai didn't recognize. Among them was a young man who looked like an older, more muscular version of Jake. This had to be Dustin Harper. Well, Jake called out as Kai approached. The mysterious martial artist finally shows up. I was beginning to think you'd chickened out. I said I'd be here, Kai replied simply. Yeah, you did. And I said I'd be ready. Jake stripped off his Letterman jacket, revealing arms and shoulders built by years of weight training and football practice. My brother Dustin here was just telling me about pressure points and joint locks. Funny thing, he knows how to counter them. Dustin stepped forward, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic. Where Jake was theatrical and attention-seeking, Dustin radiated the quiet confidence of someone who had actually fought trained opponents. Nothing personal, kid, Dustin said to Kai. But my little brother needs to learn how to handle his own problems. Consider this a family lesson. I didn't come here to fight you, Kai said to Dustin. Maybe not, but you came here to fight. And Jake's been telling me you've got some kind of fancy kung fu training. Well, I've got news for you, traditional. Martial arts don't work against real fighting. Kai looked around the crowd, seeing faces filled with excitement, fear, and anticipation. He thought about his grandfather's teachings, about the responsibility that came with knowledge, about the difference between fighting for ego and fighting for principle. Jake, Kai said quietly, his voice somehow carrying over the crowd noise. This doesn't have to happen. We can end this right now, walk away, and both keep our dignity. Jake's face flushed red. My dignity? You think I need to preserve my dignity against you? I think, Kai said carefully, that dignity isn't something you win or lose in a fight. It's something you carry with you. The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in frustration. They had come to see a fight, not a philosophy lesson. Enough talking, Dustin said, stepping between Kai and Jake. You want to play the wise old master? Let's see how wise you are on your back. The circle formed naturally, students backing away to create a makeshift arena behind the gymnasium. The desert sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the concrete. Kai stood in the center, his posture relaxed but balanced, while Dustin Harper circled him like a predator. Last chance to walk away, kid, Dustin said, rolling his shoulders. I've got 6 amateur of fights under my belt. You've got what some forms practice in your backyard? Kai didn't respond. His breathing was steady, his eyes tracking Dustin's movement without fixating on any particular target. In his mind, he could hear his grandfather's voice. Watch everything, react to nothing, respond to opportunity. Dustin moved first, launching a straight right hand toward Kai's face, a textbook. Boxing jab designed to test reflexes and establish distance. Kai shifted his weight subtly, allowing the punch to pass inches from his cheek while simultaneously moving off the center line. Fast, Dustin acknowledged, bouncing back. Let's see how you handle combinations. The next attack was more complex. Left hook followed by a right cross, then a knee strike aimed at Kai's midsection. But instead of backing away or blocking directly, Kai seemed to flow around the attacks like water around stones. Each movement was minimal, precise, requiring the least amount of energy to achieve maximum effect. What the hell? Someone in the crowd whispered. Dustin's frustration was beginning to show. He was throwing real punches with real intent, but couldn't seem to connect with his target. Kai wasn't just dodging, he was redirecting, using Dustin's momentum against him. Stop running and fight. Dustin snarled, launching himself forward in a tackle attempt. This time, Kai didn't evade. Instead, he stepped into the attack, his hands moving in precise circles. One palm pushed against Dustin's shoulder while the other guided his hip, sending the larger man stumbling past and off balance. Dustin caught himself before falling, but his confident smirk had disappeared. Enough playing around, Jake called. From the sideline, "Taken down, Dustin." Dustin reset, his approach becoming more calculated. He feinted with a punch, then shot low for a takedown, a move that had worked against most of his previous opponents. But as his hands reached for Kai's legs, he found himself caught in what felt like a spider's web of movement. Kai's hands found pressure points along Dustin's arms and shoulders, not striking but pressing with surgical precision. Dustin's grip weakened involuntarily, and he found himself guided gently but inexorably to the ground. Ending up on his knees with Kai standing calmly behind him, the crowd fell silent. How did he? Logan started to ask but couldn't finish the question. Kai helped Dustin to his feet, his expression showing no triumph or malice. Are you hurt? He asked quietly. Dustin stared at him in confusion. What did you just do? I redirected your energy back to where it came from, Kai replied simply. That's impossible. You can't just. Dustin shook his head, trying to clear it. Nobody moves like that. My grandfather could, Kai said. He taught me that true strength doesn't come from overpowering your opponent. It comes from understanding the flow of force and finding harmony within conflict. Jake pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is bullshit. Dustin, what are you doing? He's just some skinny kid. Jake, Dustin said quietly, still staring at Kai with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. This kid isn't normal. Whatever he's been taught, it's the real deal. I don't care if he's Bruce Lee reincarnated, Jake shouted. This was supposed to be my fight. Before anyone could stop him, Jake charged at Kai, swinging wildly with both fists. But where Dustin had been methodical and trained, Jake was emotional and sloppy. Kai sidestepped the first swing, ducked under the second, and then did something that made the entire crowd gasp. He caught Jake's wrist mid-punch and used the momentum to guide him into a gentle spin that ended with Jake facing away from him, completely off balance but unharmed. Jake, Kai said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. This doesn't have to continue. Jake spun around, his face red with humiliation and rage. Don't you dare patronize me. Don't you dare act like you're better than me. I don't think I'm better than you, Kai replied. I think you're better than this. The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything Jake had built his identity around. For a moment, his mask of aggressive confidence slipped, and something vulnerable flickered across his features. Then Logan's voice cut through the moment. Jake! Don't let him mess with your head. Jake's expression hardened again. He looked around at the crowd, at his friends, at his brother, and Kai could see him making a choice about who he wanted to be. This isn't over, Jake said finally, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of promise. It doesn't have to continue either. Kai replied. Jake stared at him for another long moment, then turned and walked away, his crew following. Dustin lingered, approaching Kai with an expression of grudging respect. "I don't know what kind of training you've had," Dustin said quietly, "but it's something special. My brother's got a lot of pride and a lot of pressure from our old man. This isn't going to be easy for him to accept." "I didn't do this to humiliate anyone," Kai replied. "I know. That's what makes it worse for him." Dustin extended his hand. "No hard feelings?" Kai shook it. "None at all." As the crowd began to disperse, Cam approached with her camera still recording. "That was incredible," she said breathlessly. "I've never seen anything like it." "It's not about the technique," Kai said, watching Jake's retreating figure. "It's about understanding that every fight is really about something else entirely." The video of Kai's confrontation with both Harper brothers went viral within the Red Rock High ecosystem by that evening. Cam had edited it carefully, focusing on Kai's restraint and technique rather than the Harper's humiliation. But the impact was undeniable. Students who had never spoken to Kai before began approaching him in the hallways, some with respect, others with curiosity, and a few with barely concealed fear. The next morning, Jake Harper was absent from school. His dad pulled him out for the day, Cam reported during lunch, sliding her laptop across the table to show Kai the school's online discussion forum. "But look at this, the conversation has completely shifted." The forum, usually dominated by sports discussions and social gossip, was filled with threads about bullying, respect, and what it meant to be strong. Students were sharing their own experiences with intimidation and expressing admiration for Kai's approach to conflict resolution. "Some people are calling you a hero," Cam continued. "Others think you humiliated Jake unnecessarily. But everyone's talking about it." Kai scrolled through the comments, his expression growing more troubled with each post. "This isn't what I wanted. What did you want?" "I wanted Jake to stop bothering Aiden and anyone else. I didn't want to become some kind of symbol or start a revolution." "Maybe that's exactly why you're the right person to be a symbol," Aiden said, joining them at the table. His usual nervous energy seemed calmer, more confident. "You didn't ask for this, which means you're not doing it for the wrong reasons." That afternoon, Coach Graves asked Kai to stay after gym class. They sat on the bleachers while the next period students filed in for their lesson. "I've been coaching for 23 years, Coach Graves said without preamble. "I've seen a lot of fights, a lot of talented athletes, a lot of kids who thought they were tougher than they really were. Yesterday was something different." Kai waited, unsure where the conversation was heading. "That wasn't just martial arts training," the coach continued. "That was philosophy in action. Someone taught you not just how to fight, but when to fight." "And why to fight?" "My grandfather," Kai said quietly. "He must be a remarkable man. He died 6 months ago. That's part of why we moved here. My mom thought a change of scenery would help me deal with the grief." Coach Graves nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for your loss. But I think he'd be proud of how you handled yesterday. You showed more maturity and restraint than most adults would have in that situation." "Jake's not evil," Kai said. "He's just carrying weight that isn't his to carry." "What do you mean?" "His father, his brother, the expectations of being a Harper in this town. He's performing a role someone else wrote for him." "And now?" Kai looked out at the gym where students were beginning their warm-up exercises. "Now he has to decide if he wants to keep playing that role or write his own story." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the main hallway. Through the gym windows, they could see students gathering around something, their voices rising in excitement and concern. "What's going on?" Coach Graves muttered, standing up. They walked to the gym entrance and saw Jake Harper standing in the center of a crowd, his face bearing fresh bruises and his right hand wrapped in an ace bandage. "Doesn't matter what some kung fu wannabe thinks he proved," Jake was saying, his voice carrying that familiar aggressive edge. Real fighting isn't about dancing around and looking pretty. Jake, Cam's voice cut through the crowd noise. What happened to your face? Jake's smile was bitter. Training session with my old man. He wanted to make sure I understood the difference between winning and losing. Kai felt his stomach tighten. Your father hit you? My father taught me a lesson about family honor and not letting outsiders make us look weak. Jake's eyes found Kai's across the crowd. And he taught me that sometimes you need backup to handle problems that are bigger than you thought they were. What does that mean? Aiden asked nervously. Jake's smile widened, and for the first time since Kai had known him, it looked genuinely dangerous. It means this isn't over, Chun. Not even close. My cousin Marcus is coming down from Phoenix this weekend. He's been cage fighting for 3 years, and he owes our family a favor. The crowd murmured uneasily. This had moved beyond high school politics into something darker and more serious. You don't have to do this, Jake, Kai said quietly. Whatever pressure you're feeling from your family, it's not worth escalating. This situation. Escalating? Jake laughed harshly. You think yesterday was escalation? You have no idea what escalation looks like, but you're about to learn. Coach Graves stepped forward. That's enough, Harper. Take your theatrics somewhere else. This isn't theatrics, Coach. This is family business. Jake turned back to Kai. Saturday afternoon, same place. But this time, it's going to be a real fight with real consequences. And this time, you won't be walking away looking like some Zen master. As Jake walked away, surrounded by his crew, Kai realized that his attempt to end the conflict had only transformed it into something larger and more dangerous. The tiger had awakened, but so had forces beyond his control. This is getting out of hand, Coach Graves said quietly. I know, Kai replied, watching Jake disappear around the corner. But I don't know how to stop it without betraying everything my grandfather taught me. Maybe, Coach Graves suggested, it's time to think about what your grandfather would do if you were here to protect his student. That evening, Kai sat in his room, staring at a photograph of his grandfather, a small, weathered man with kind eyes and hands that spoke of decades of disciplined practice. For the first time since arriving in Red Rock, he felt truly alone and uncertain about the path ahead. The tiger had awakened, but the jungle itself was stirring in response. Saturday arrived with an oppressive desert heat that seemed to mirror the tension building throughout Red Rock High's social network. By noon, word had spread beyond the school community. Marcus Harper, Jake's cousin, had arrived from Phoenix, and the confrontation that had begun with a bucket of paint was about to reach its climax. Kai spent the morning in meditation, sitting cross-legged in his backyard, trying to center himself for what was to come. His mother had noticed his distraction over the past few days, but hadn't pressed for details, trusting that her son would handle whatever adolescent drama was troubling him. If only she knew, Kai thought, that this had moved far beyond typical high school conflicts. At 2 p.m., Cam arrived at his house with Aiden and 3 other students who had found courage in Kai's example. You don't have to do this, she said for the 3rd time that week. We could call the police, report Jake's threats, get the school administration involved. And then what? Kai replied, slipping on a simple black t-shirt. Jake gets suspended, his family pressure intensifies, and nothing really changes. The cycle just continues with someone else. But Marcus isn't like Jake or even Dustin, Aiden said nervously. I looked him up online. He's had 12 professional fights, 8 wins. This isn't some amateur MMA guy. He's dangerous. Kai considered this information. His grandfather had always taught him that a true martial artist must be honest about their limitations. Pride was the enemy of wisdom, and wisdom was the only thing that kept skill from becoming recklessness. Then I'll have to be careful, he said simply. The group walked toward the school in tense silence. Word had spread through social media, and by the time they reached the area behind the gymnasium, a crowd of nearly 100 students and recent graduates had gathered. This was no longer a private dispute, it had become a public spectacle. Jake stood in the center of the circle, flanked by Logan and several football players Kai didn't recognize. Beside them was a man who could only be Marcus Harper tall, heavily muscled, with the kind of scarred hands and cautious eyes that spoke of serious fighting experience. "Well, well," Jake called out as Kai approached. "The mysterious Kung Fu Master shows up after all. I was beginning to think you'd finally developed some common sense." "I said I'd be here," Kai replied calmly, though he could feel his heart rate increasing as he assessed Marcus. This wasn't like facing Jake or even Dustin. Marcus moved with the controlled grace of someone who fought for money, not ego. "Marcus," Jake said, gesturing to his cousin, "meet Kai Chun, the guy who thinks he's too good to fight like a normal person." Marcus studied Kai with professional interest. "You're smaller than I expected," he said quietly. "Jake's been telling me you've got some kind of mystical kung fu powers." "I've had some training," Kai replied carefully. "Traditional stuff?" "Yes," Marcus nodded. "I respect traditional arts. Learned some karate as a kid before I moved into MMA. But here's the thing, kid, traditional martial arts are beautiful, philosophical, artistic. But they don't work against real fighters in real situations." "Maybe we don't have to find out," Kai suggested. "Afraid we do. See, Jake's family has a reputation in this town, and my Uncle Jake's dad called in a favor. Nothing personal, but I need to make sure you understand that embarrassing Harpers has consequences." The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing to record what everyone expected to be a brutal mismatch. Kai could see Coach Graves at the edge of the gathering, his expression worried, but not yet intervening. Marcus stepped into the circle, and immediately Kai could feel the difference. Where Jake had been emotional and Dustin had been confident, Marcus was simply professional. He moved like someone who had learned to hurt people efficiently and without hesitation. "I'll try to keep this quick," Marcus said, raising his hands into a standard boxing guard. The first exchange told Kai everything he needed to know. Marcus threw a probing jab, not wild like Jake's swings, or telegraphed like Dustin's attacks, but sharp, precise, and immediately followed by a second strike. When Kai evaded the first, this was someone who understood distance, timing, and how to cut off angles. Kai found himself giving ground, using more dramatic evasions than he had needed against the Harper brothers. Marcus's pressure was constant and methodical, each attack designed to limit Kai's options and force him into increasingly defensive positions. "Come on, fight back!" Someone in the crowd yelled. But Kai was learning, adapting to Marcus's rhythm and style. His grandfather had taught him that every fighter, no matter how skilled, had patterns and preferences. Marcus favored his left hand, tended to circle to his right, and had a habit of dropping his guard slightly after throwing combinations. When Marcus shot for a takedown, Kai didn't try to sprawl or defend conventionally. Instead, he moved with the attack, using Marcus's momentum to guide him into an awkward position where his leverage was compromised. Marcus found himself off balance, struggling against what felt like invisible hands redirecting his energy. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, resetting his position. "You're very skilled," Kai said respectfully. "But you're fighting against yourself as much as against me." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Philosophical bullshit won't save you, kid." The next exchange was more violent. Marcus came forward with a combination that backed Kai toward the crowd, then fired a vicious knee strike toward his midsection. Kai absorbed the impact on his forearms, feeling the power behind it, but used the moment of contact to apply pressure to specific points along Marcus's extended leg. Marcus stumbled, his leg going numb for a crucial second. In that moment, Kai moved not to attack, but to position himself so that Marcus's next swing carried the older fighter off balance and into an embarrassing stumble. "He's playing with him," someone whispered. "No," Coach Graves said quietly from the sideline. "He's trying to teach him but the lesson was becoming dangerous. Marcus's professional pride was being challenged, and unlike Jake or Dustin, he knew how to escalate when frustrated. His next attack came with real intent to harm, a series of elbow strikes designed to break ribs or crack skulls that Kai couldn't evade completely. One elbow grazed his shoulder, spinning him around and leaving him vulnerable to a follow-up that could have ended the fight. But before Marcus could capitalize, Jake's voice cut through the crowd noise. "Stop!" Everyone turned to see Jake pushing through the circle, his face pale but determined. "Marcus, stop. This has gone far enough. What are you talking about?" Marcus demanded, breathing hard. "I'm just getting started." "No," Jake said firmly. "Look at him." He pointed to Kai, who was standing calmly despite the close call, his expression showing concern for Marcus rather than anger or fear. "He could have hurt you 3 different times in the last minute, but he didn't. He's been pulling his punches this entire time." Marcus looked at Kai with new understanding. "Is that true?" "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," Kai replied quietly. "I came here to end this cycle of violence before someone really gets injured." "You think you could have hurt me?" Marcus asked, his professional curiosity overriding his aggression. Instead of answering with words, Kai demonstrated, moving faster than he had throughout the entire fight. He stepped inside Marcus's guard and placed his fingertips against 3 pressure points along the older fighter's neck and shoulder. Marcus's right arm went completely limp. "Pressure points," Marcus said with something approaching awe. "I heard about this stuff but never believed it actually worked." Kai stepped back and showed Marcus how to restore feeling to his arm with gentle massage. "My grandfather taught me that true martial arts isn't about proving superiority. It's about understanding harmony and finding peace within conflict." Marcus flexed his restored arm, staring at Kai with newfound respect. "Kid, you're wasted on high school drama. You should be teaching." "Maybe I will," Kai said, glancing at the crowd of students who had watched the entire encounter with fascination rather than the bloodlust they had expected. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. Principal Williams called Kai to her office, but instead of discipline, she offered an opportunity. "I've been hearing interesting things about you, Mr. Chen," she said, gesturing for him to sit across from her desk. "Coach Graves tells me you handled a difficult situation this weekend with remarkable maturity." "I tried to resolve it peacefully," Kai replied carefully, "and succeeded, from what I understand. Tell me, would you be interested in co-leading a student initiative focused on conflict resolution and peer mediation?" Kai was quiet for a moment, processing the unexpected turn. "Who would I be co-leading with?" "Jake Harper." The surprise must have shown on Kai's face because Principal Williams smiled. "Mr. Harper came to see me this morning. He asked if there was a way he could use his influence in this school for something more constructive than intimidation. He specifically requested to work with you." An hour later, Kai found himself sitting in the school's conference room with Jake, Cam, Aiden, and several other students who had been affected by the recent events. Jake looked uncomfortable but determined, his usual swagger replaced by something more genuine. "I owe everyone in this room an apology," Jake began, his voice lacking its typical aggressive confidence. "I've been acting like strength means making other people afraid of you. Watching Kai this weekend made me realize that real strength is about protecting people, not intimidating them." "What changed your mind?" Cam asked, her journalist instincts engaged. Jake was quiet for a moment. "When Marcus was about to really hurt Kai, I realized I didn't want to be responsible for that. And when Kai chose not to hurt Marcus, even when he could have, I realized I've been completely wrong about what it means to be strong." Over the next hour, they outlined a plan for a student-led program that would address bullying, conflict resolution, and what Jake called redefining what it means to be tough at Red Rock High. "I want to start a meditation and martial arts club," Kai said. "Not for fighting, but for understanding yourself and developing inner peace. I want to use the school Newspaper to highlight students who show courage in nonviolent ways, Cam added. I want to create a peer support network for students who've been bullied, Aiden said, his voice stronger than Kai had ever heard it. Jake looked around the table. And I want to use whatever influence I have to make sure this school becomes a place where people can be different without being afraid. The following week, Kai gave his first presentation to the entire student body during a special assembly. He stood on the stage where Jake had once held court, but instead of commanding attention through intimidation, he earned it through quiet authority. My grandfather taught me that every person carries both a tiger and a lamb inside them, Kai said, his voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. The tiger represents our capacity for strength, courage, and protection. The lamb represents our capacity for peace, compassion, and understanding. Most people think you have to choose one or the other, be aggressive or be passive. But my grandfather taught me that true strength comes from knowing when to wake the tiger and when to embrace the lamb. He paused, looking out at faces that had watched him with suspicion, fear, and curiosity over the past month. The tiger doesn't fight for dominance or ego. The tiger fights to protect what matters. And sometimes the most powerful thing the tiger can do is choose not to fight at all. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Students approached him after the assembly with stories of their own bullying experiences, their fears, their desire to be part of something better. Jake worked alongside him, using his natural leadership abilities to organize and motivate rather than intimidate. Logan was among the first to join their meditation group, seeking what he called a way to be strong without being mean. Other football players followed, curious about the mental discipline that allowed Kai to remain calm under pressure. Coach Graves offered to supervise their martial arts demonstrations, fascinated by the philosophical aspects of Kai's training. This isn't just physical education, he told Principal Williams. This is character education. Even Marcus Harper made an unexpected appearance, driving down from Phoenix to attend one of their weekend workshops. I've been fighting for 8 years, he told the assembled students. But I learned more about real strength in 5 minutes with Kai than in all my professional fights combined. Spring arrived in Red Rock with the kind of sudden beauty that made the desert bloom in unexpected colors. Kai had been at the school for 4 months now, and the changes were visible not just in policy or programs, but in the way students moved. Through the hallways with less fear, more confidence, and a growing sense that strength could mean something different than they had previously understood. The Meditation and Martial Arts Club had grown to over 60 members, meeting every Tuesday and Thursday in the gymnasium. Kai taught basic forms and breathing exercises, but more importantly, he taught the philosophy behind the movements, how physical discipline could lead to mental clarity, how understanding your own power made you less likely to abuse it. Jake had transformed from antagonist to ally, using his natural charisma to promote the values Kai had introduced. Their friendship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect rather than dominance or submission. Jake still played football, still held leadership positions, but he led through inspiration rather than intimidation. You know what's funny? Jake said one afternoon as they walked across the campus together. I used to think being strong meant making other people weaker. Now I realize that real strength is about making everyone around you stronger. My grandfather would have liked you, Kai replied. He always said that the best student is the one who teaches the teacher something new. What did I teach you? Kai considered the question as they passed a group of freshmen practicing forms in the courtyard. Their movements still clumsy, but their concentration intense. You taught me that sometimes the people who seem the strongest on the outside are the ones who need the most help finding their real strength. Cam had documented the entire transformation in a series of articles that had been picked up by local news outlets and eventually by national education magazines. Her piece titled, "The Tiger Wakes: How One Student Changed a School's Culture," had won a state journalism award and earned her early acceptance to several colleges. "I keep trying to figure out how to end the story," she told Kai as they sat in their usual spot in the courtyard. "But it doesn't feel like it's ending, it feels like it's just beginning." "Maybe that's the point," Kai replied. "Some stories don't end, they just keep growing." Aiden had perhaps changed the most visibly. The nervous, anxious boy who had once cowered in hallways now led workshops on building confidence and finding your voice. He had been elected to the student council and was planning to major in psychology with a focus on adolescent development. "I want to help other kids who feel like I used to feel," he told Kai. "Invisible and powerless. Because you showed me that. Everyone has power, you just have to find the right way to use it." That evening, Kai sat in his backyard as he had every day since arriving in Red Rock, practicing the forms his grandfather had taught him, but tonight felt different. The movements that had once been a connection to the past now felt like a bridge to the future. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. The principal called. She said, "You've been invited to speak at the district conference about anti-bullying programs. I'm proud of you, sweetheart." As the desert stars appeared overhead, Kai moved. Through the final sequence of his evening practice, the tiger wakes form that his grandfather had taught him on his 16th birthday. "This is the most important form," Master Liang had said that day. "It teaches you that the tiger sleeps not from weakness, but from choice. And when the tiger chooses to wake, it does so not in anger, but in wisdom." Now 18 months later, and 1,000 miles from that backyard in San Francisco, Kai understood what his grandfather had meant. The tiger had awakened not to destroy, but to protect. Not to dominate, but to inspire. Not to end conflict, but to transform it. Behind him, the lights of Red Rock High School glowed against the desert night. Tomorrow, students would walk those hallways with a little less fear and a little more hope. They would face their problems with tools Kai had helped give them, not just physical techniques, but mental disciplines, emotional wisdom, and the understanding that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than putting them down. The tiger had awakened, and in doing so, had taught the whole jungle a new way to live. As Kai completed his final movement and bowed to the memory of his grandfather, he smiled. Master Liang had been right about many things, but especially about this. The greatest victory was indeed the fight you didn't have to fight. But sometimes, Kai had learned, you had to be willing to fight in order to create a world where fighting was no longer necessary. The desert wind carried the sound of laughter from the school, where the late-night study groups were wrapping up their sessions. It was the sound of students who no longer walked in fear, who had learned that they could be different without being targets, who understood that strength and kindness were not opposites but partners. The tiger slept again, content in the knowledge that it had awakened not just itself, but an entire community to the possibility of something better. And in Red Rock, Arizona, the legend of the quiet boy who changed everything would be told for years to come, not as a story of fighting, but as a story of transformation, wisdom, and the quiet power of choosing peace. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.